There's a thing your body does that you never agreed to. It logs damage. Not the dramatic kind, the small kind. The sleep you shorted by an hour, the fight you swallowed instead of finished. Researchers gave it a name, allostatic load. The wear that builds when stress never fully switches off. The bill comes due eventually, and it comes due in the worst possible currency, which is your capacity to act when it finally matters. You think you are lazy. You are not lazy. You are running a machine that has been quietly overheating for years, and you mistook the smoke for your personality. The men who get somewhere figured out early that the goal was never to push harder. It was to stop losing power they could have kept. Find the leaks before you go looking for more fuel. Think about a phone at 4%. You start rationing. You turn off the things that drain it. You stop opening apps you do not need. Every action gets weighed against what it costs. Now look at how you treat yourself. You hand your best hours to noise. You let an argument from Tuesday live rent-free in your skull through Friday. The brain runs on glucose, and so does your self-control. And when the tank gets low, your discipline is the first thing to go soft, which is exactly when you make the choices you spend months regretting. So guard it like the scarce thing it is. The man who protects his attention looks almost boring from the outside. He says no a lot. He leaves early. And he is dangerous precisely because nobody is bleeding him. Discipline does not announce itself. Walk into a gym before sunrise and the guy already 3 sets deep is not thinking about how disciplined he is. He is just a man who does this. That word "does" is the whole trick. Psychologists studying habit found that people who attach a behavior to identity outlast the ones chasing a result by a mile. Stop telling yourself you are trying to read more. You are someone who reads. The gap between those 2 sentences is where most lives quietly fall apart. Your mind hates inconsistency between who you say you are and what you do, and it will scramble to close that gap once you plant the flag. So, plant it. Claim the thing before you have earned it. Then spend every day refusing to make a liar of yourself. Comfort taught you a reflex, and the reflex is killing you slowly. Watch what happens the second something gets hard, the set gets heavy, and your hand wants to rack the bar. The conversation gets real, and you reach for a joke. Each time you bail, your brain files away a tidy little lesson. That quitting works, that relief is one surrender away. That is how behavior gets trained, through what follows it. And right now, every escape is a reward, teaching you to fold faster next time. Goggins understood the loop runs in reverse too. Stay in the thing your mind is begging you to leave. Finish 1 rep past where you wanted to stop, and you start training the opposite animal. The voice screaming at you to quit is not looking out for you. It is scared. You do not hand the keys to the part of you that is scared. A man who cannot sit still in a quiet room is telling on himself, whether he knows it or not. Notice the grab for the phone the instant nothing is happening. That itch is real, and there is machinery behind it. When you stop feeding the brain a task, it slips into a wandering mode that loves to dredge up old failures and rehearse new fears. Stillness exposes you to your own mind, and most men are terrified of what is in there, so they stay busy as a form of hiding. Sitting for 5 minutes doing nothing but breathing will feel harder than an hour of errands, and that difficulty is the entire point. You are teaching the most disobedient muscle you own to obey. A man who can be alone in his own head without flinching has taken something back that almost nobody bothers to reclaim. Ever notice how the thing you left half done keeps tapping you on the shoulder? The email unsent, the project rotting in a folder, The call you owe your father. A psychologist named Zygarnik watched waiters remember complex orders perfectly until the moment the bill was paid, then forget them completely. Unfinished business holds a grip on your mind that finished business releases. So while you walk around feeling vaguely heavy and cannot name why, the answer might be a dozen open loops running in the background, each one a small drain you stopped noticing. Close them, not because they are all important, most of them are not, but because the act of closing hands the power back to you. You cannot run anything from inside a cluttered mind. Finish the small things first and watch how fast the fog burns off. Two men take the same hit, same layoff, same betrayal, same bad news from a doctor. Months later, one is rebuilding and one is rotting, and the event was identical, so the event explains nothing. What separates them is the sentence each told himself in the first 10 seconds after impact. Researchers call it explanatory style. The man who hears this is permanent. This wrecks everything. This is all my fault. He was finished before he understood what hit him. The other one frames it as temporary, as contained as data. Same wound, opposite outcome, and the dividing line ran straight through the story. You will not always choose what lands on you. You always choose the narration. And once you really sit with that, the excuses dry up because the pen was in your hand the whole time.
Men believe their biggest problem is lack of opportunity, lack of money, lack of discipline, lack of confidence, or lack of motivation, when the reality is often much stranger and far more invisible. They are trapped inside their own minds for so many hours every day that they barely experience reality directly anymore. Their body sits in one room while their attention lives somewhere else entirely. They replay conversations that ended 3 years ago. They rehearse arguments that will never happen. They imagine disasters that never arrive. They revisit failures that no longer exist outside memory. They fantasize about futures they never act upon. The nervous system becomes trapped inside endless internal simulations, while life itself continues unfolding unattended. Then these same men wonder why existence feels heavy, dull, repetitive, and strangely disconnected. The answer is brutal. They are not fully living their lives. They are mostly thinking about their lives. A man can spend 20 years physically alive while psychologically trapped inside a theater of his own imagination, watching the same mental movies until they feel more real than reality itself. The brain possesses a network known as the default mode network, and while it serves important functions involving reflection, memory, self-awareness, future planning, and meaning-making, it was never designed to become the permanent location of human consciousness. Yet modern life pushes people into that state constantly. Long periods of scrolling, long periods of passive consumption, long periods of isolation, long periods of low-stakes stimulation, long periods without demanding focus. The result is predictable. The mind turns inward, then inward again, then inward once more. Eventually, a person becomes trapped inside himself. He starts analyzing instead of acting, simulating instead of building, rehearsing instead of speaking, planning instead of executing. The machine continues generating thoughts endlessly because that is what the machine does. Thoughts are not proof of wisdom. Most are simply mental weather. Yet the average person treats every thought like a courtroom witness, whose testimony must be examined carefully. This creates exhaustion because the brain was never meant to carry that much unnecessary traffic. Imagine a man sitting alone at home on a Saturday afternoon. Nothing terrible is happening. No emergency exists. No real threat is present. Yet inside his head, 3 different futures are collapsing simultaneously. One version loses money. Another embarrasses himself publicly. Another fails at some goal he has not even attempted yet. His heart rate rises, his mood changes, his energy drops, his confidence weakens. Notice the insanity of the situation. Reality remains unchanged. The suffering exists entirely inside a simulation generated by the mind. The body responds as if the danger were real because the nervous system cannot always distinguish between actual experience and vividly imagined experience. This is why chronic overthinking becomes so destructive. A man can psychologically experience hundreds of failures before attempting anything. He can exhaust himself fighting battles that never existed outside imagination. Ancient warriors understood something. Modern people have forgotten. Thinking has value. Excessive thinking becomes paralysis. The purpose of the mind is not endless reflection. The purpose of the mind is effective action. Somewhere along the way, many people became trapped inside an endless preparation phase. They want to think a little more, analyze a little more, research a little more, plan a little more, understand a little more, yet action remains postponed indefinitely. The default mode network becomes a comfortable prison because thought creates the illusion of progress. The man feels busy, he feels engaged, he feels productive. Yet nothing changes externally because the energy never leaves the mind and enters reality. This is why some people spend years consuming self-improvement content without improving. The information enters, reflection occurs, insight occurs. Nothing gets built, nothing gets tested, nothing gets executed. The cycle continues. A fascinating pattern appears when researchers study states of deep engagement. Focused work suppresses excessive default mode activity. Intense training suppresses it. Meaningful conversation suppresses it. Meditation suppresses it. Creative flow suppresses it. Notice the common denominator. Attention leaves the self and enters the task. The internal narrator becomes quieter. The person becomes absorbed by reality rather than trapped inside mental commentary about reality. This explains why people often feel most alive during periods of complete engagement. Not because life suddenly became easier, because consciousness stopped orbiting itself constantly. A craftsman building something, an athlete training intensely, a musician performing, a writer fully immersed in the page, a man speaking honestly with someone he loves. During these moments, self-consciousness fades, presence increases, the burden of endless mental noise disappears temporarily. Life becomes direct again. Modern men often suffer from a strange form of starvation, not physical starvation, experiential starvation. They spend so much time consuming representations of life that they stop participating in life itself. They watch instead of build, observe instead of engage, scroll instead of create, analyze instead of move. Then they wonder why nothing feels meaningful. Meaning rarely emerges through passive observation. Meaning emerges through contact. Contact with effort, contact with challenge, contact with reality. The nervous system evolved through interaction with the world, not endless observation of it. Every hour spent trapped inside mental loops widens the gap between thought and experience. Eventually, the person feels disconnected because experience became secondary to analysis.
Imagine walking through your life with a clipboard and observing it the way an investigator would observe a crime scene. No emotional attachment, no excuses, no sentimental stories, just evidence. You wake up and check your phone. Energy gained or energy lost. You spend an hour scrolling through content you barely remember afterward. Energy gained or energy lost. You talk to a certain friend, energy gained or energy lost. You enter a specific workplace, energy gained or energy lost. You think about a particular goal, energy gained or energy lost. The fascinating thing about this process is how quickly patterns emerge. Some people leave you feeling stronger, sharper, more focused, and more hopeful. Others leave you feeling drained, irritated, distracted, insecure, or exhausted. Some activities create momentum, others create stagnation. Some environments expand you, others shrink you. The answers are rarely mysterious. They are usually obvious. The difficulty comes from accepting what the evidence reveals. Most people carry drains they identified years ago, but refused to remove because removal felt uncomfortable. The friend who constantly complains. The social group built entirely around gossip. The endless notifications, the toxic relationship, the habit of checking messages every 5 minutes, the late-night scrolling ritual that destroys sleep, the obligation accepted out of guilt rather than conviction, the dream abandoned yet still occupying mental space every day. Notice something important. Not all drains are people. Some of the worst drains are unfinished chapters, old regrets, unmade decisions, delayed conversations, lingering resentments. The human nervous system hates open loops. Every unresolved issue consumes attention quietly in the background, even while the person pretends everything is fine. Energy leaks through those cracks continuously. A strange truth appears once. You begin studying highly effective people. They are not always working harder than everyone else. Often they are carrying less unnecessary weight. They eliminated friction. They removed distractions. They reduced obligations. They protected attention. They became ruthless about where energy flowed. Most people approach productivity backwards. They keep adding things, more goals, more commitments, more responsibilities, more projects, more social obligations, more content, more information, more noise. Then they wonder why motivation disappeared. A warrior does not become stronger by carrying random objects into battle. He becomes stronger by removing everything that does not contribute to victory. Simplicity creates power. Clarity creates power. Focus creates power. Excess creates exhaustion. Look at how this operates psychologically. A man spends 30 minutes worrying about a future scenario that never arrives. Energy lost. He replays an argument from 3 years ago. Energy lost. He imagines judgment from people whose opinions do not matter. Energy lost. He compares himself endlessly to strangers online. Energy lost. None of these activities produce solutions. None produce growth. None produce movement. Yet the nervous system treats them like real work because attention is being consumed. This creates one of the great illusions of modern life. People feel exhausted despite accomplishing very little because their mental energy was spent fighting imaginary battles. A man can wake up tired before noon without lifting anything heavier than his phone, because the mind has been carrying psychological garbage since sunrise. This matters because energy is the currency behind every meaningful achievement. Discipline requires energy. Focus requires energy. Learning requires energy. Creativity requires energy. Leadership requires energy. Relationships require energy. Physical training requires energy. A person constantly operating at a deficit begins making weaker decisions. Standards drop. Temptations become harder to resist. Long-term thinking disappears. The body seeks immediate relief because reserves are depleted. Then the individual blames himself for lacking discipline, when the deeper issue is that half his energy was being drained before the day even started. A leaking fuel tank cannot win a race regardless of how talented the driver is. Fixing the leak often matters more than pressing harder on the accelerator. The brutal part arrives when you realize that some drains cannot be removed through motivation alone. Structural changes become necessary. You may need different boundaries, different routines, different relationships, different digital habits, different environments. This is where most people stop, because they want improvement without sacrifice. They want more energy without removing anything. They want focus while keeping distractions. They want growth while protecting comfort. Life does not negotiate that way. Every meaningful gain requires subtraction somewhere. A gardener removes dead branches so healthy growth can occur. A sculptor removes stone to reveal form. A disciplined man removes unnecessary burdens so strength can emerge. Growth often looks less like addition and more like elimination.
Look at what happens when a man attempts to pursue something meaningful. He sits down to work on a business. An uncomfortable moment arrives. Attention leaves. He tries learning a difficult skill. Frustration appears. Attention leaves. He starts reading a book capable of changing his thinking. A notification appears. Attention leaves. The pattern repeats endlessly. Most people believe they have a motivation problem. Often they have an attention problem. They cannot stay with anything long enough for momentum to develop. Every meaningful achievement requires sustained engagement. Muscles require repeated effort. Businesses require repeated effort. Relationships require repeated effort. Skills require repeated effort. Identity itself requires repeated effort. Attention serves as the bridge connecting intention to execution. Remove the bridge and nothing reaches completion. A strange irony defines modern life. People possess more information than any generation before them, while simultaneously struggling to apply even small amounts of it consistently. The issue is not lack of knowledge. Information floods every device constantly. The issue is retention, reflection, application. Knowledge requires focus long enough for ideas to penetrate deeply. Yet many minds never remain still long enough for that process to occur. New information arrives before previous information has been integrated. Another video, another article, another opinion, another piece of advice. The person consumes endlessly while changing very little, because attention never remains in one place long enough for transformation to begin. Consumption creates the illusion of progress. Application creates actual progress. One requires attention. The other often avoids it. This matters because attention determines what grows inside your life. Whatever repeatedly receives focus becomes stronger. Focus on distractions and distractions become stronger. Focus on fears and fears become stronger. Focus on opportunities and opportunities become stronger. Focus on skills and skills become stronger. Focus acts like sunlight. Whatever receives enough of it expands. Most people distribute attention so carelessly that they accidentally strengthen the very things they claim to dislike. They spend hours focusing on problems without creating solutions. Hours focusing on comparison without creating progress. Hours focusing on entertainment without creating capability. Then they wonder why their lives reflect those priorities. The answer sits in plain sight. Attention reveals values more honestly than words ever will. The deeper issue extends beyond productivity. Fragmented attention fragments identity itself. A man who cannot remain present with one thought long enough to examine it deeply struggles to develop independent thinking. Every belief becomes borrowed. Every opinion becomes reactive. Every emotional state becomes influenced by the latest stimulus entering awareness. The individual begins living as a collection of reactions rather than a deliberate force. This is dangerous because meaningful lives require depth. Depth requires concentration. Concentration requires protection. A mind constantly interrupted rarely develops original insight, because original insight often emerges after sustained engagement with a problem. Most people abandon the problem before reaching that point. Their attention leaves too quickly. Their focus collapses too easily. Notice how alive you feel after periods of genuine immersion, not stimulation. Immersion. Finishing a difficult workout, building something meaningful, having a deep conversation, reading for an hour without interruption, creating rather than consuming. The nervous system experiences a completely different quality of energy during those moments because attention becomes unified. Internal conflict decreases, mental noise decreases, presence increases. Human beings evolve to engage deeply with tasks, challenges, environments, and relationships. Fragmentation creates fatigue because the brain keeps switching contexts constantly. Every switch carries a cost. Enough switches create exhaustion. This explains why many people feel tired despite spending most of the day sitting down. Attention was working overtime. Changing this begins with treating attention as something valuable rather than something endlessly available. Protect it aggressively. Remove unnecessary notifications. Create periods where devices remain out of reach. Read longer material. Train without checking the phone. Work in uninterrupted blocks. Learn to sit with boredom instead of escaping immediately into stimulation. Boredom is not the enemy. Boredom is often the doorway back to concentration. The nervous system must relearn how to remain with one thing long enough for depth to emerge. Initially, this feels uncomfortable because distraction created dependency. Stay with the discomfort. Adaptation follows. The same nervous system that learned fragmentation can learn focus again. Energy follows attention. Wherever attention goes repeatedly, energy follows automatically. This is why some people feel drained before noon. Their focus has been scattered across dozens of trivial inputs already. Every notification, every message, every headline, every comparison, every distraction. Tiny energy withdrawals occurring continuously. By contrast, a disciplined person directs attention intentionally. Fewer targets, more depth, less noise, more clarity. The result is not merely better productivity. The result is a stronger mind, a calmer nervous system, greater emotional stability, more meaningful progress, more personal power. The individual stops being dragged around by whatever captures attention next and starts deciding consciously where life force will be invested.